All right, ladies and gents, here we are again with our Outliers butcher paper notes, and I have my Photoshop 2015 version open. You guys are going to get a 2016 version on your screens, but shouldn't be a problem. So here we go. We're going to first open up my notes that I have saved in the handouts folder. I've saved everybody's notes already, so I'm going to open up my um, P drive. So you're going to go to my PC on your desktop, and you're going to go to the P drive, select the P drive, and scroll down to handouts. Sorry, excuse me, handouts. You can go to handouts and scroll down to syncs, and then 2016-17, English 4, Outliers, and then chapters 3 and 4. We're going to do chapter 3 notes today. I went ahead and labeled my picture of my notes as Syncs notes. Okay, so here's the deal, you guys. Um, if you didn't take as good a notes as say that I have, or for whatever reason that day you weren't feeling too into it and you didn't get as good a notes, you are welcome to open my notes and follow along and do the same exact thing that I do with my notes in my tutorial. The idea here is that you get the information down, and this is kind of just another way of processing that information and synthesizing it, and for future use in our project or test or what have you. Okay, so I'm going to right click on Syncs Notes, and I'm going to select Open with Adobe Photoshop. And you might have kind of a similar menu, but get to Open With, and then if it doesn't show Adobe Photoshop right away, you'll click More Programs and then find Adobe Photoshop. Alright. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock my background layer. And I'm going to go ahead and study my notes before I create my document. And you'll notice that I tend to write notes right to left, and I have no idea why I've been doing that. It's just the way that I've been doing my notes. So actually, my starting point from the first part of the chapter is about Christopher Langan, and he goes into, and this is how Gladwell starts the chapter. He goes into a TV show, and has highest IQ, average American IQ is 100, and then and then he jumps into research with IQ, and then smart enough, and then he uses the example of the Terman study. And then we go into kind of this section over here, intelligence has a threshold. And looking at that, I think this is going to be my central idea, is that intelligence has a threshold in terms of a success rate. So I think I might use that as my center of my Photoshop document. I have a quote in here, and then I have the Raven's progressive matrices as kind of an example of uh, an intelligence test. And then we have a University of Michigan Law School study, and then intellect. I have another quote over here, and then divergence test, imagination. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start my document. I'm going to go to File, New, and this is going to be an 8.5 by 11 document, 300 pixels, and in terms of background content, I'm going to change that to white. And at the top where the name is, I'm going to call this Outliers Butcher Paper Notes Chapter 3, and I'm going to put my name in there so that way I know that this is mine for later. Go ahead and insert your name at the end, so when you save this and send it to me for a grade, I'll know it's your work. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Alrighty, so I'm going to click back to my notes here one more time, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to pull out this section right here, and that's going to be my central idea. So I'm going to use the lasso tool and cut around that arrow. Doot, 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 being real careful. Boom. Okay, got my marching ants. Grab my move tool, click and cut that out, and then select the next tab and then drop that in. And then I'm going to resize this bad boy so it becomes my central idea. Oh, I forgot a heading, so I need to do that after I put this one in. Remember, it's always a good idea to label our layers. So I'm going to take my, hit enter return there, and double click, slow double click in my layer piece there. And then this is going to be my central idea. I'm just going to type it in, central idea. All right. Okay, next I want to get rid of this grayish looking background, so I'm going to take my magic wand tool and then click inside of there and then hit delete, and then delete out some of the gray areas that I don't want to have in there. I'm going to hit Control D, and before I move on to my next piece, I want to make sure that I get my heading up there and my title and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to click the shape tool, and then right click there and select rectangle, and I'm going to do the same, pretty much square thing that I did before. And I'm going to change the color this time. I'm going to go with something blue. Why not? Just mix it up, Grab my arrow tool and make this the exact size of my document. Hit the enter return key. And then next I need to, I'm just going to yeah, I'll just leave that as header. That's our rectangle. That's fine. Put my text tool up here, and it's at 36 points, so we'll see how that's going to work. If I click with my text tool on top of this box, it'll actually make a text box that fits that layer perfectly. So I'm going to start typing in Outliers, and I got some settings here that I need to change because my probably doing something different with some text in another Photoshop piece. So I'm going to click on character here, and sure enough my character height is at 125%, so I want to change that to 100%. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that as Avenue Black. I think I'm going to adjust my text spacing to a little bit something smaller. Go ahead and leave it at 35 pixels there. So I'm going to type in Outliers, and then I'm going to type in Butcher. Oops, can't spell today. B-U-T, there we go. Butcher, hello. Hello. There we go. Paper, notes. That's not working out for me. It's going to be too big, so I'm going to select my move tool, select that, have that layer selected still. Change that to 30 point. And maybe it's the capitalization that's throwing me off. That's probably what it is. Okay. So I'm going to take my text tool, Butcher Paper Notes, chapter 3. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and hit return below it. And then I'm going to type in the trouble with geniuses. And I'm going to change this font from a little bit thinner. So right now it's Avenue Book or Avenue Black, which is bold, and I want to change this to Avenue Light, so it's just nice and small there. Okay. Before I move on, I'm going to make sure that I do a quick spell check. So I'm going to select my move tool, go to edit, check spelling. Make sure I didn't spell anything wrong there. Perfect. Don't want teacher can't be spelling things wrong, right? Make sure I put my name underneath there. Just going to go ahead and put it right there like before. And I don't want it that big, so select my move tool, change that from Avenue Black to Avenue Light, and a little bit smaller there so it doesn't stick out so much. Move this over, change the size with my text tool, move it back over, boom. Okay, that's taking too long. There we go. Okay. So I have my central idea here. I'm going to move that layer up above my name and all that kind of stuff, so it kind of, as I go in order here, it'll be easier for me to keep track of in my layers panel. So intelligence has a threshold, inverted U-curve. So, and essentially, so what that means is too little doesn't help you and too much doesn't help you. There's somewhat kind of like a happy medium in there where you just need to have the right amount of intelligence, or are you smart enough, kind of thing. So let me go back to my notes here, and maybe there's something in here that I can use to do that. Let's see. I don't think I have anything in my notes that says that directly. So I'm going to go back to my other document here. And what I'd like to do is use a shape and custom shape. And ooh, I got a little light bulb here. Maybe I want to use a little light bulb in my design. Let's try that. Let's hit the shift button here. Boom. And this is in your shapes, by the way. Okay. And what I'm going to do with this shape is I'm going to change the color to a yellow. Nice bright yellow like this. And then I'm going to add a stroke around that shape so that the yellow stands out, because yellow does not stand out very well against anything except for black. So put yellow around there. Okay. That's my, I'm going to actually move this. I want to move this underneath that central idea layer. So I'm going to move it, take my layer underneath and just move it so it falls underneath that text. And I just want to make it a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to hit the enter return key and then drop the opacity down to like 50%. Okay, so you can see it just a little bit, but it's there, and kind of get the key on there. All right, I didn't expect that shape to be there. It gave me a good idea right there. What I'm actually looking for is the arrow key. Okay, and what I want to do here is draw a couple lines. And I don't want this to be yellow, so I want to move this up above my central idea and double click that, and then change my effects layer. I want to put a black stroke around it like I do all the time around shapes. Okay, what I want to do is move this, and I want to move it behind all my text again. So hit the enter return key as I moved it, and then put it behind my central idea layer so it goes behind my text that I had written. Okay, and then I want to drop the opacity again. I resize that just real quick and then drop the opacity down to 50% so it doesn't interfere with my text per se. Okay, I'm going to have two different arrows going into one direction, and I want to point this kind of, oops, Control Z that. I want to point this right about where the the bottom arrow goes to. So I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger, just like that. Okay, where my left side of the inverted U, where the U curve goes. Okay, and by the way, the inverted U curve idea was not exactly in the chapter. I've taken that idea from another book that Malcolm Gladwell has written called David and Goliath. And in that book, he uses the inverted U curve to explain what he means by like thresholds. You only have to be smart enough, kind of thing. Too smart or only smart enough. So I want to double click, or I want to copy that layer. So I'm going to click the Alt button and with my move tool, and then just change that. And then I'm going to switch it around this direction. Okay, and then hit the enter return key. You know what? I kind of want to go a little bit higher there. There we go. Okay, so what do I want to write there? I want to write, see, too much intelligence, or too high of IQ. Too much. I'm just going to write too much. I think I'll get the gist of that if I do that. Too much. And then over here above this other arrow, this is going to be too little. Okay, so I'm going to put that right above there. Okay, there we go. And then perhaps what I should do is right in the middle there say just right, kind of like the Three Bears, right? The soup was just right. Alright, so I'm going to take that arrow and click the Alt key and my move tool and copy that again. only this time I'm going to rotate this up right above that inverted U shape, and then hit the enter return key when I get that where I want it to be. Take my text tool, and above the arrow I'm going to say just right. Okay, so I'm going to move that down right there. Perfect. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. Save as you go. So save as. I have a folder set up for this in my outlier piece. So I'm going to save this in here, and I'm going to make a new folder in there for chapter 3. I am saving all of your notes, by the way, in these folders. And so then I'm going to save it, chapter 3. Okay, there we go. All right. Next, I'm going to go back to my notes here, and I kind of want to move along here. I don't want to take too much time in breaking down everything, but I do, want to talk through some of these things. I want to get the term and study in there. So here we go. We have this great quote. I'm going to zoom in here. It says, research has tried to link IQ to real life success, but the relationship works only to a point. Greater than 120 doesn't equal any added advantage. So that's really what I want as part of my other part of my central idea. So that's not going to work with the rectangular tool. I'm going to have to use my lasso tool again. So I'm going to grab all that. Oops. Gotta do a little better job with the lasso there. Sometimes it's kind of hard with the trackpad that I'm using. A little bit easier with the mouse, or a little bit easier with a pad. Okay, all right, here we go. So then I'm going to grab my move tool, got that outline, cutting it out, and dropping it into my Photoshop document. Okay, so I want this to go basically right underneath my central idea here. So I'm going to zoom in, see what I'm working with, and hit the enter return key just in case I need to, and then grab my magic wand tool and get rid of all that gray. Control D once I do that, and I accidentally grabbed something extra right there, so I'm going to delete that out with my lasso. Control D to deselect, and then I'm going to move my notes. And let me see, where do I want to put this? Do I want to put this above? Yes, I want to put this above. So I'm going to go like this, just right above, okay? And that's going to be kind of I want to make this a little bit larger so it's easier to read, and it's going to go just above my just right text, and I want to get rid of a little bit of that section there. So boom, perfect. Okay. Research has tried to link IQ to real life success, but the relationship only works to a point. Greater than 120 IQ doesn't equal any added extra advantage. Okay, important idea there. So you only have to be smart enough. So let's get that in there. I think that's an incredible example. So I'm going to put an arrow down here. Oh, I'm going to make an arrow first, and then I'm going to turn it. So you know what? I don't want that arrow. I want a different arrow. I deleted that out just real quick. I want to do. What do I want to do? I want to do. Let's do this arrow. Why not? We haven't done this arrow yet. So I'm just going to draw it down here. It kind of reminds me of the Mario Kart arrow that makes you go a little bit faster. Make that a little bit smaller, and let's make it yellow just like the Mario Kart arrow, right? Because why not? It'd be kind of fun. Oops. Click OK. Move this. I want to move this layer up here, so I'm keeping my layers pretty. Oh, I forgot to rename layer 1. That when I re-put this in, research shows. So I'm going to double click layer 1 and say research shows. That'll be that layer. I'm going to take my shape. I'm going to rotate it first to about 90 degrees. Hit enter return. I'm going to double click on the thumbnail there, and then change that to yellow. And I can even grab this same. Oh, it'll probably. Yeah, let's grab that. Okay, and then let's outline it in black. So let's go layer, stroke, And then let's go ahead and make this a thicker stroke so it really stands out. Let's make it like 10 pixels. Let's do an inside so we get the nice sharp angles, position sharp angles on that stroke rather than around it, what happens when you do it with a center. Kind of looks like a almost like a Star Trek V. Let's do this like total Mario Kart style. Let's do an Alt and do a couple of those arrows down, and I'm going to shift click, or I'm going to hit enter return, and over here in my layers panel I'm going to hit shift and select both layers, so that way I can actually resize these just a little bit together so they look the same, and then hit enter return key. Okay, and then I'm going to take my text tool and let's see here, I want to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to make this nice and long, and I'm going to change the direction of this text. But first, let's do it this way. So I'm going to move it up and type in smart enough. Okay, and then I'm going to resize this and make it long. So then what I'm going to do is my text orientation up here, I'm going to change that down so that way it goes all the way down there. And I want to make it big and change it bold and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to change it from Avenue Light to Avenue Black. You could pick something that's also, there's like most text that you'll see have bold or big examples or big styles. So that way you can, make it look a little bit bigger. I want to do all uppercase, and I want to make it just, nice and large. Let's go ahead and change the text spacing to something that's smaller, so maybe I can get this in all the way in where I want it to go. And grab my move tool, and it's kind of like a racetrack, and use my arrow too so it goes like that, just like in there. Smart enough. Oh look, I have all this extra space down here too. Maybe I'll stretch that out. Yeah, let's do that. Let's stretch this out just a little bit. So I'm just going to use the move tool to resize this rather than using the text tool, so I can get it. Oops. Control Z that. Messed up there. I'm hitting the shift key and resizing this so it's all in proportion. And I'm going to move that up and then hit the enter return key. Okay, I'm going to come back over, and I need to wrap this up here in about 10 minutes. So Control D. I want to grab the Lewis Terman study, and I want the University of Michigan thing, and I want intellect and achievement are far from perfectly correlated. I like that quote. I also like this quote. Terman didn't understand what a real outlier was, and that's a mistake we continue to make. So I don't know if that one's going to be as important, so I may not leave that one in. And my rectangular marquee tool is still not going to work, so I'm going to have to use my lasso tool. I'll probably just go ahead and leave out the Ravens, piece. So I'm just kind of focusing on these main ideas from this chapter, and I also want to go faster. So I'm going to grab the Terman Studies thing that I have in here, and it's full of tons of information. So part of the reason why I want to pull it out, and it's one of the biggest examples that he uses for this piece. So it's gonna take up some room, but I'm gonna resize it here a little bit. So I'm gonna come over to the layer that it put it in and double click that, and then type in Terman Study, and then I'm gonna take my magic wand tool and get all that grayness out. Just don't need it in there. Control D that. I'll go ahead and leave the text in there, or the lines and stuff that I drew though. I'm gonna take my move tool and resize this bad boy, and I'm gonna put it, kind of, should we put it like down here? Nah, let's put it like right there towards the bottom, and then hit enter return. I got a little bit of duct tape over there on the right hand side, so I'm gonna grab my magic wand, or I'm sorry, not my magic wand, my lasso tool, and highlight that and delete. Control D. Okay. So I got my, Lewis Terman. We must look for production of leaders. So I kind of want to put like up there, Terman was wrong, but if you remember right, chapter 2 does focus on Terman and Terman's study. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And I'm going to take my lasso tool again. And let's see. I want to take this quote, highlight that quote, get around it, and then cut it out. So I'm going to cut it out, put it over here in my butcher paper, and I'm going to rotate it with my move tool. And I want to put it underneath right here as kind of like this central idea. So I'm going to hit enter return next to underneath my central idea. Take my magic wand tool and delete out all the gray, and control D that. I want to put a bubble around that quote, so I'm going to go back to my shape tool. Oh, before I do that, where that layer got inserted in my layers panel, I'm going to do intellect quote, and then I'm going to go up to my shape layer and then grab one of those thought bubbles. So the thought bubble, right there, thought bubble, and gonna resize or draw that in there, and it's gonna need to be kind of wide. So, and I wanna move this so it's my my things here. First of all, I want to flip this so it goes into that space over here. This space over here, the bottom part of that space over there. I want to. Do I want to change the color? I kind of want to change the color on this, so I'm going to double click on the black, and let's do something green, and let's do something like minty. Why not? And let's drop the opacity of that way down. You know, kind of like a whispering 50% thought bubble, and let's change that name from shape 4 to thought bubble. And this is going to need to go underneath the intellect quote because that, you know, we want that text to show up really nicely. The other thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a stroke around that thought bubble. I don't want it to be, actually that'll work. We'll do that. It's already, the opacity is already down. Let's not do a 10 pixel though, let's do like 6. That looks better. Black. Okay, and then last but not least, we're going to go up to edit, transform, and flip horizontal so that little bubble area goes in there. So next, I want to grab both those layers, the intellect quote and the thought bubble, and I just want to push them over just a little bit so that they are filling into that area a little bit better and not interfering with some of the text that I have in that section. Okay, and then I'm going to put that Michigan thing right underneath here. So I'm going to hit the enter return key and click over to here. And remember, I have this University of Michigan Law School affirmative action, how well graduates do in the real world, was also another study. It wasn't based on it wasn't necessarily based on intelligence. It was, you know, they were smart enough and that's all they needed to be, right? They weren't the top of their class, but they were smart enough and they were successful in the real world. So I'm going to highlight all that section there and try not to get into Heather Bemis's section up there. Grab my move tool, click and drag this and drop it in over here. And I need to rotate it down. And what's cool is I've already got, you know, lines in here, so it'll be a nice, you know, division between my other Terman study. I do need to resize this though to make it fit in that space. Hit the enter return key and let's get this gray out of here so I can see what I'm really working with. And then control D that and then move again, move down. So it's kind of going into that a little bit. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and live with that because I want to be able to read it, and even if it goes underneath that, I think it'll be okay. You know, I could try to go up into this thought bubble here, but it'll be okay. So hit the enter return key, where it put in as layer 1. This is, I'm just going to type this in as Michigan study, okay, and about affirmative action, okay, how well graduates do in the real world. And that had nothing to do with whether they were the top of the class or they were at the bottom of the class. Just remember that. So maybe I guess I could put a little arrow in that, but I want to speed this up because I want to move on. But I'm just remember that. That's why we put that quote in there, right? Because it didn't matter that they were at the top of their class. They were smart enough to be in the law school and earn a degree, and that still translated into success. So last but not least, I have this Gladwell quote: Terman didn't understand what a real outlier was, and that's a mistake we continue to make. I think I could probably fit that in right over here in this left-hand side. So I'm going to click over, and you notice that I've left some things out, and like this divergence test equals imagination. He talked a little bit about how sometimes, like really smart people with really high IQs don't have a ton of imagination, and that can be a problem. And so sometimes, like some people would rather give you a divergence test in terms of measuring your imagination and not so much your intelligence. And remember, that was the paperclip deal where, we had you, name as many uses as you can for a paperclip. And it kind of shows you creativity in, some of those things. So I'm going to hit enter return here and get my magic wand and delete out all the gray. Don't want the gray, so Control D that. And I'm just going to turn this just a little bit more, push this up so it fits better in my notes there. Gladwell. Okay. All right. What do I want to do? Do I want to highlight that or put quote marks in there or something? I think I'll just leave it so we can move on. Okay. Got my notes all kind of consolidated here. Got my thoughts consolidated. Before I move on, make sure that all of the text that I typed in is spelled correctly. Now, the handwritten text, you're just going to, if it's misspelled, that's okay. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is the text that you can do spell check on. So grab your move tool and go to edit, check spelling, and if you don't have any misspelled words, you get spell check complete. And when it does pop up any words, choose the correct spelling there. Okay? All right, so hopefully this one was a little bit quicker for you guys. Just to recap, just the right amount of intelligence. You only have to be smart enough. There is no relationship between IQ and success. Like you can have too little intelligence, you can have too much. Really, this is all about, intelligence does not equal success. In part 2, he talks about, well, what kind of intelligence are we really looking for here? Because he talks a little bit about the Robert Langan or the Chris Langan story, and gives us a little bit of an insight in terms of the two different types of intelligences that are important, and having both in equal balance is just as important as having, say, like a high IQ type of intelligence. All right, make sure you save your work. So save and go File, save the Photoshop version, and then go File, Save As, and make sure you change that from a Photoshop document to a JPEG, JPEG, and save it in your U drive and save. I'm going to save it as a high quality and click OK. And then you're going to email this image as a email attachment to me in an email. All right, this concludes chapter 3. Until next time.